breaking news coming to us from America that jurors in the Sean Diddy Combs trial have reached a verdict on all charges, we understand. We think we've got our US correspondent Martha Kellner, who is at the court in New York. Let's see if we can now. Martha, 5 charges that he is facing. We know that the jury were able to reach a verdict on 4 of them yesterday. They were still deliberating on 1. It now appears they've reached verdicts on all 5. We don't know what those verdicts are yet, but they've come back, some would say, relatively quickly.
Yeah, this has all happened remarkably quickly this morning. Yesterday, this jury, there was a very dramatic moment when they revealed they had reached verdicts on 4 of 5 criminal counts against Sean Diddy Combs, but were deadlocked on a 5th criminal count, the most serious, the most complex charge of all, which was racketeering conspiracy. Well, they've been deliberating for just 1 further hour this morning. It does now, though, appear that they have reached a verdict on all 5 charges. His family, Sean Combs' family, had no idea that this was going to happen so quickly either. They were in court at the start of the day. They then left the courtroom just 15 minutes ago, and about 5 minutes ago they returned once again. They pulled up outside this courthouse in a big black people carrier, as they have done throughout this trial. They have shown steadfast support for Sean Combs. They went back inside. They're now on their way to the courtroom. The defence team are in the courtroom as well, and the prosecution attorney. So everyone is now present. It's just a waiting game now. The judge expected to ask the jury in the next few minutes for their verdict on these 5 criminal charges. I'm told from our colleagues inside the court that the family, 6 of Sean Combs' 7 children, his mother Janice, they have now arrived in that courtroom. They're sat in the front row of the public gallery. Sean Combs now in court as well. As he was walking into court, he held his hand to his chest. That's a gesture he's done throughout this trial when looking at his family, putting his hand over his heart. He's also making praying gestures towards them. Who knows how he must be feeling right now. He knows that his future freedom hinges on the decisions that this jury of 8 men and 4 women have made. They have now come to a decision on that 5th criminal count. So they have a verdict in all 5 criminal counts that Sean Combs faces. Just as a reminder, he faces 2 counts of sex trafficking in relation to Cassie Ventura, who was his girlfriend for more than a decade, 2 counts of transportation for prostitution as well, and 1 count, as I was saying, of racketeering conspiracy. That's the one that this jury previously hadn't been able to come to a decision on. Yesterday, they came back, they delivered a note to the judge in which they said that at least one of the jurors had unpersuadable views on that racketeering conspiracy. They asked if they could deliver a partial verdict instead. The judge said, no, you must go back to the jury room and you must deliberate further. Well, now it appears that extra hour that they've spent inside the court today has broken the deadlock. So now we're waiting to find out the verdict on these criminal counts.
And Martha, just in terms of this final charge, the racketeering charge, which is very serious, prosecutors needed to prove that he'd established a criminal enterprise, I understand, a coordinated plan between the musician and at least 1 other person to commit at least 2 crimes over a span of several years. It was always going to be the most challenging charge for the prosecutors to get a conviction on, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's no surprise, really, that it is this racketeering charge that has caused the issues in the jury deliberation room, because it is the most complex and the most serious charge that Sean Combs faces. This racketeering conspiracy charge is usually applied to multi-person crime organisations like the mafia. It was introduced to give prosecutors the ability to target the head honchos in these sort of organisations, as opposed to the ordinary foot soldiers if you like. So, yeah, used in the past to prosecute organisations like the mafia. It has been applied in a more modern sense in criminal cases, for instance, against R. Kelly, another R&B and hip-hop music star. It was also being used in a case in Georgia against the President Donald Trump. And so in order to reach a guilty verdict on this racketeering conspiracy charge, prosecutors have been trying to establish Sean Combs as the leader of a criminal enterprise. So this idea that he didn't just have an ordinary celebrity entourage of bodyguards and personal assistants and so on doing his bidding, but that he was actually directing them to cover up his alleged crimes. And when explaining why they believe he is guilty of the racketeering conspiracy charge, government prosecutors said he's the general here, he's not a foot soldier. They said, remember, this is his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him. So they were trying to basically prove that he used this network of employees to cover up sex trafficking, for instance, the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and of Jane, the woman who testified using a pseudonym, and of drug distribution and other crimes. So, yeah, this is the most serious charge that he faces, carries a potential life sentence in prison. But the sex trafficking charges that Sean Combs faces are in and of themselves incredibly serious. They carry potential prison sentences of a minimum of 15 years to life. He faces 2 counts of sex trafficking, one in regard to Cassie Ventura, who was the key star witness in this case. As a reminder, he was in a relationship with her for more than a decade. Her testimony was among the most disturbing that this jury has heard over the past 7 weeks, perhaps most affecting because she took the stand almost 9 months pregnant. In fact, she gave birth barely a week after giving evidence here, so she was heavily pregnant. In fact, I was speaking to one seasoned trial lawyer at the time who said she was the most heavily pregnant person they'd ever seen take the stand in a criminal case. And she explained the development of their relationship over the course of years. She said they met when she was still a teenager. He was much older. She said she quickly fell in love with him. But then Sean Combs, she said, introduced her to the idea of freak-offs. This is the name that Combs had for these drug-fueled sex marathons. So Ventura alleges that he forced her to have sex with a string of male sex workers against her will. She said that these sessions would sometimes last hours and hours, even days on end. So demanding were they on the participants, she said, that they would have to have IV drips to recover afterwards. She said that their relationship was characterised by major power and wealth imbalances and a constant threat of violence. She said she was beaten on a regular basis. On one occasion, she said she was beaten so severely that she had to spend days in a hotel room recovering from her injuries before she could be seen in public again. And the jury also saw repeatedly this video, which has now become infamous, a video of Sean Combs appearing to drag her by the hair down the corridor of a hotel room, of a hotel corridor in Los Angeles, appearing to kick and punch her. Very, very disturbing footage. The jury was also shown footage which was sealed evidence, so not viewed by the public or by journalists inside that court. Footage of these so-called freak-offs. They were apparently so disturbing, these scenes that the jury was forced to watch, that one member of the jury, a man, ripped his headphones from his head, apparently unable to bear it any longer. I'm just checking the notes from our colleagues inside court. I'm told that the jury is being brought back in to the courtroom behind me, inside the courthouse behind me. Sean Combs is seated at the defence table with his head down. The defence team is now standing. The government prosecutors, who have worked so hard to try and return guilty verdicts in this case. They're seated as well, the jury filing back in, which indicates that these verdicts on these 5 criminal counts that Sean Combs stands accused of, that this verdict is coming very soon.
Martha, he chose not to give evidence, didn't he? I mean, he pleaded not guilty to all these charges, but didn't speak in the court.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that was the big question for the first few days. You know, would Sean Combs take the stand when the defence opened its case? I think it became obvious pretty early on that he wouldn't take the stand. They obviously decided that wouldn't be valuable to their case. He did speak to the court very briefly. He stood up last week. He thanked the judge, said, Your Honour, you've done a marvellous job over the past 7 weeks, clearly trying to ingratiate himself with the judge. We're just receiving the verdicts now on that first charge of racketeering conspiracy, which carries a potential life sentence. This is the one that the jury was deadlocked on. They have now reached a decision. They found the defendant, Sean Combs, not guilty of that, the most serious and complex charge of which he was accused. They found him not guilty. So Sean Combs not guilty of racketeering conspiracy. On count 2, which was the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, known as Cassie, his girlfriend of more than a decade, this jury have also found Sean Combs not guilty of that charge. So that's the first 2 charges against him, not guilty of both those charges of racketeering, conspiracy and sex trafficking. On count 3, however, this relates to transportation for prostitution. The allegation that he transported male escorts across state lines for the purposes of sex. He has been found guilty of that charge. He faces a potential sentence of 10 years in prison. It is, however, unlikely he would receive that full 10-year sentence. So he's been found guilty of transportation for prostitution in relation to Cassie Ventura, guilty on that charge. On count 4, which is the sex trafficking of the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane, sex trafficking of Jane, Sean Combs has also been found not guilty. However, on the transportation for prostitution in relation to Jane, he's been found guilty. So Sean Combs guilty on 2 of the 5 charges, but this is crucial. On the 3 most serious charges, the ones which he faced potential life sentences in prison, he has been found not guilty. So just to recap, on that most serious charge of racketeering conspiracy, the charge which he faced a potential life sentence in prison, he has been found not guilty. The 2 counts of sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane, he's also been found not guilty. So Sean Combs receiving not guilty verdicts on the 3 most serious charges of which he was accused. Guilty verdicts, though, in the transportation for prostitution charges. These relate to him arranging for the transportation of male escorts across state lines to participate in these events that became known as freak-offs, the sex marathons that have been so central to this case. So I think on balance, Sean Combs and the defence team will be pretty pleased with this verdict, because while the sex trafficking for prostitution charges carry a possible maximum sentence of 10 years for each count, as a first-time offender, it's very unlikely that Sean Combs will receive the top end of that prison sentence.
But Martha, as you're reading through those verdicts, you say that that's the top end of a sentence. So is it likely that he would receive a custodial sentence for the 2 guilty verdicts on these lesser charges?
I think that's impossible to say right now. We don't yet know what the date for the sentencing is, but that will be up for that will be up for them to weigh up what sentence they will give. But as I say, it is unlikely he would receive the top end of that sentence, simply because Sean Combs is a first-time offender. I'm just reading the notes from inside the courthouse. The judge now speaking to that courtroom, saying this trial has received considerable press. I don't know whether you can make out behind me, but it is a media circus here. Dozens and dozens of conventional mainstream media, as they call them over here. But there are also dozens and dozens of citizen journalists, of influencers who have been live streaming every single moment of this trial outside court. There are people selling T-shirts that say freak offs do not equal racketeering conspiracy. There are people on megaphones chanting their support for Sean Combs. So, you know, it is, as this judge says, you know, a hugely closely scrutinised trial. The judge now reminding the jury, he said, our jury system, what happens in the jury room stays in the jury room. I think there is an important reason to respect the privacy of your deliberations. Of course, some members of this jury may choose to speak to the press in the wake of this verdict, but the judge cautioning them not to reveal the intricate details of how, over the course of 13 hours, this jury of 8 men and 4 women reached the decision that Sean Diddy Combs is guilty of 2 counts of sex trafficking for prostitution, but not guilty of the 3 most serious charges against him, that racketeering conspiracy charge and the 2 charges of sex trafficking. Sean Combs's lead defence attorneys, Mark Agnifilo and Tini Garagos, they're hugging inside the courtroom, clearly very pleased with this verdict. Sean Combs again making a praying gesture in a thank you to the jury. He's directly looking at the jury as he makes this praying gesture. He's been doing that throughout this case towards his family, but the first time that he's done that, gesturing towards the jury. So clearly a hugely dramatic last 10 minutes in court as those verdicts were being read out.
And Martha, you've been there throughout this all. Just remind us of what you think were the key moments in this trial.
Yeah, I think definitely the key witness was Cassie Cassandra Ventura. She was one of the first of the 35 witnesses that the prosecution team called. I think it was all the more affecting, her testimony, because she made her way past the jury looking extremely heavily pregnant, just a week away from giving birth. And in fact, the defence team, Combs's defence team, had made an application that she didn't walk in front of the jury because he thought they may, or the defence team thought they may be unduly swayed by her condition, as they called it, that they may feel more sympathetic towards her because she was so heavily pregnant. But I think hearing her detail their more than a decade-long relationship, seeing that video certainly of her being beaten by Combs in the corridor of that hotel in Los Angeles was very disturbing. But crucially, he was not on trial for domestic violence. If he had been, there's obviously every chance that he would have been found guilty because of that video, because of what seemed to be the proof that he had beaten Cassie Ventura. And, you know, the defence team said he was on occasion violent. They didn't deny that he was a flawed individual, but they said that he only ever had consensual sexual relations. And the jury clearly agreed with them because they found Sean Combs not guilty of sex trafficking. So sex trafficking was this allegation that he used force, fraud or cohesion in order to force these women, Cassie Ventura and the woman who testified as Jane, that he forced them into those sexual acts. Well, the jury disagreed. They found him not guilty of sex trafficking. So I think that probably was one of the key moments. But I guess another key moment was the defence making such a short defence case. You know, the prosecution spent 28 days making their case. The defence team spent just 25 minutes making their case, and the tone was almost sneering of the lead defence lawyers. They laughed off the claims. They said that these women's stories had been grossly exaggerated. They said that this was simply the case of Sean Combs's private life, while it may have been unconventional, being turned into a crime scene. So they were vehement in their defence of him. They said, yes, he's a flawed individual, but he did not force these women into having sex. The jury, 8 men, 4 women, clearly agreed with them. So I think those were two of the key moments, really, or the key parts of this trial. And clearly the fact that the defence did take such a short amount of time defending Sean Combs proved very effective indeed. Their defence case actually was the cross-examination of these 35 witnesses that the prosecution team called. And, you know, I think one of the key bits of evidence they entered was lengthy text exchanges in which both Cassie and Jane seemed to express at times excitement in the idea of participating in these freak-offs, these sex marathons that have been so central to this case. And I think that has clearly resonated with the jury, that they saw in black and white these women, at least at points, appearing to express some sense of enjoyment in these sex marathons.
So just to remind you, if you're just tuning our way, we've just had verdicts in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. He was facing 5 charges. He was found guilty of 2 of them, which are the lesser charges: transportation to engage in prostitution, 2 counts of that. But he was found not guilty of the most serious charge, which was racketeering, and also 2 other charges of sex trafficking. And as Martha was just saying there, inside the court, his defence team hugging themselves, Sean Combs himself making praying gestures towards the jury. So clearly happy with the verdict as far as they are concerned, despite the fact he's been found guilty of 2 out of the 5, but they are certainly the lesser charges. Sentencing, though, will be a little time away. And as Martha was saying, throughout this trial, we learned a great deal about what goes on in his private life, what goes on in the bedroom. His defence team arguing that this was not a case about domestic violence. It was not a case about someone's sexual proclivities. It was a case about crime, and he should be allowed to get up to whatever he wants to in his private life. Martha, who's down there for us outside the court alongside the world's media, do we expect Sean to come out, and do you expect any kind of statement outside? What if his team led the media to believe is going to happen next?
Yeah, I think that is very possible, and let me tell you, it will be a complete circus outside here. I'm just hearing from our colleagues inside the courtroom. The jury have now left that courtroom, and Mark Agnifilo, who is Sean Diddy Combs's lead defence lawyer, he is now making the application to the judge that Sean Combs be released from custody, that he is allowed to return to his home in Miami under house arrest. This is what Mark Agnifilo, Sean Combs' lead lawyer, is telling the court, telling the judge right now. He said, in light of the fact that Sean Combs is no longer charged with sex trafficking, which carried detention, and he is only charged with prostitution, he should be released with appropriate conditions to Two-Star Island. Now, Two-Star Island is his luxury mansion just on the outskirts of Miami. He said, we have his passport and we'll give it to pre-trial services. This is still Mark Agnifilo talking. He said every federal crime is serious. This is a vastly different crime than sex trafficking, so a considerable change in his conditions should be considered. He said that Sean Combs' private plane has already been chartered and is in Maui, which is one of the Hawaiian islands. He says he doesn't have access to that plane. Apologies, he's saying that he doesn't have access to that plane, so that he's making the application that he poses no threat of absconding. He said this is his first conviction. His entire family is in here, and that is true. 6 of his 7 children have been here throughout almost the whole trial. His 7th child is still just a toddler, so obviously hasn't been in the court. His mother Janice has been in the court, though. Mark Agnifilo, the defence lawyer, is proposing that 3 or 5 of those family members can sign onto a bond. So that is a contract in effect that assures that Sean Combs won't flee to escape justice. In this case, again, Mark Agnifilo saying we propose that he be released today to live at his home in Florida, a bond of whatever size the judge sees fit. Of course, Sean Combs is a man of enormous wealth. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of his career as a music producer, a music star himself. You know, he's really made a brand for himself. That's how he's amassed such a huge fortune. The judge just considering this proposal. I'm just reading the notes. So I don't say anything that's not exactly correct. The judge saying that he's not going to resolve this matter right this second. He's taking some time to consider that application from Sean Combs' defence team, but also an application from the prosecution to one of the lead attorneys for the government, Maureen Comey. She's now making her proposal to the judge. She's saying that in regard to the transportation for prostitution, those are the 2 charges of which Sean Combs was found guilty. They carry a maximum 10-year sentence in prison. She's saying that the violence and drug use detailed in the course of this case should be considered. She says that the government will still request substantial incarceration, so substantial imprisonment, in her words, of Sean Combs. The judge now asking each of the sides to put forth a letter. So I think this will take some time to iron out just what happens now, but the possibility still remains that Sean Combs could walk free from this courthouse today. What a remarkable turn of events that would be, given that he spent the last 10 months in a detention centre, the Metropolitan Detention Centre in Brooklyn, just over the river from here. Every morning that this court has been in session over the past 7 weeks, he's been brought over the river back into this courthouse. He now presumably is feeling incredibly delighted at the possibility that he may not spend much longer, if any longer, in prison, given that he is a first-time offender and he has already served that 10 months.
And Martha, you talked about his family and the fact that he has enormous family support, his mother Janice and his 7 children being by his side throughout this. I mean, it's just a difficult case for family members to listen to, isn't it?
It certainly is. And, you know, his twin daughters, Jessie James and Delilah, they've been in court throughout almost the entirety of this trial. They're just 18 years old and, you know, they've heard pretty excruciating details about their dad's sex life. I have to say, at times, they have chosen to leave the court when the most sensitive parts of this case were being prosecuted. But they have heard details which no 18-year-olds should ever hear about their father. And even, the defence team admit that he led a pretty unconventional lifestyle. They described it as a swinger's lifestyle. They said he did participate in these freak-offs. They don't deny that. They couldn't deny that because it's subject of lengthy text exchanges and, these videos that the jury was shown as well. But they say that this was entirely consensual. They said that the relationship between Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura in particular, this is the woman who he was in a relationship with for more than a decade. They described it as a great modern love story. They said that she was a beautiful woman who actually likes sex. They very much characterised it as a mutual agreement that they had to participate in these sex marathons that was enjoyed by both of them. They acknowledged that this jury had seen videotape of Combs kicking, shoving and dragging Ventura by her hair. You can see Cassie Ventura on the screen there. Other witnesses said that they saw him physically attacking her. They saw bruises, they saw busted lips and other evidence of abuse. Well, to that, Sean Combs' lead defence lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, said, "We own the domestic violence. We don't deny it. We don't deny that he led a swinger's lifestyle. We don't deny that he had a drug problem. There is no question about that." But the defence team sought to recast Ventura from an alleged abuse victim into someone who was conniving, who had other relationships alongside her relationship with Sean Combs. They also noted that she settled a civil lawsuit with Combs back in 2023, and that was really what sparked this case. That civil lawsuit that Cassie Ventura filed against Sean Combs. They settled out of court very quickly. It took less than a day for them to reach an agreement. It's understood that Ventura received $20 million in that civil lawsuit settlement, but that really allowed the government to open this investigation into Sean Combs, to charge him with sex trafficking and with racketeering conspiracy. But this jury was convinced by that defence case. They sided with the defence on that racketeering charge and on the sex trafficking charges, the most serious charges against Sean Combs, finding him not guilty. So Sean Combs will be very pleased with the job his defence team have done, certainly.
And at the heart of this case, Martha, the prosecution arguing that he'd used his fame and his stature in the industry to live a life of crime. The defence, though, saying fundamentally, this was his lifestyle. He and his partners enjoyed swinging, and this was just how he lived his life.
Yeah, and I think they were making the case that, look, lots of celebrities have big entourages, lots of celebrities are supplied with drugs, lots of celebrities have unconventional sexual lifestyles, but that is not a crime. Clearly, this jury thought some aspects of his sex life were a crime because they found him guilty of those two charges of transportation for prostitution. They relate to Combs arranging for the prostitution, arranging for the transportation of male escorts across state lines to participate in these so-called freak-offs, these sex marathons. So they did find some elements of criminality to his conduct. Just to give you an idea of what is happening in court right now, the judge is allowing both the government team and the defence team to go away and consider their applications to him as to what should happen next, what sentence Sean Combs should be given, whether he should remain in custody. The judge has set a deadline of 1 p.m. For those two teams, the government and the defence team, to submit those applications to him. So 1 p.m, it's now 20 minutes to 11 a.m. local time. So around 2 hours and 20 minutes, we will learn, presumably, what will happen today to Sean Combs. Just another live application that Mark Agnifilo is making to the court. He says Mr. Combs has been given his life by the jury. He is going to get his life. He would be a fool and he is not to do anything that would risk his future freedom. That's what the lead defence lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, is saying. He says that Sean Combs treasures the opportunity, in his words, that he has been given and that he will not run afoul. The judge reminding Mark Agnifilo, Combs' lawyer, though, that he is going to await these written submissions by both the defence and the prosecution team. Just a bit of detail of Sean Combs' demeanour, though. He is on his knees at the moment. He's got his head in his chair. He's praying. His family, who are not 10 yards away from him, they're seated in the public gallery. They're clapping and cheering, yay. The prosecution is hugging each other. They've worked very hard to try and clear Sean Combs' name. The prosecutors are walking by. They're clearing out of the courtroom. Mark Agnifilo, the lead lawyer who I was speaking about there, and Tini Garagos, who is another of Sean Combs' lead lawyers. She's just 35 years old, a rising star in the legal world. Mark Agnifilo is hugging her so hard that he's picking her up. They are clearly absolutely overwhelmed, delighted, thrilled with this verdict that they've secured for Sean Combs. Not guilty verdicts on three of the most serious criminal counts that he was accused of. No doubt about it, this is a victory for them.
And what about the jury, Martha? 8 men and 4 women. We saw, so much throughout this case of violence towards women in his behaviour. Does that have any bearing? Was that something that the defence and the prosecution were very keen to fight over, who the makeup of this jury was?
Yeah, I think the prosecution were keen to, reflect the image of him as a really violent individual in order to prove the sex trafficking charges, because sex trafficking, you have to, or the jury was asked to find whether Combs used his power and wealth to manipulate these women into participating in sexual acts by force, fraud and cohesion. So they were trying, the prosecution, to paint the picture of him being a violent man in order to show that Cassie Ventura in particular lived in fear of Sean Combs, that the threat of violence was enough to persuade her, to coerce her into going along with these sex marathons against her will. So that's why they were really dwelling on the idea of him being a violent man. That's why they were showing the video of him punching and hitting her in the corridor of that LA hotel room. That's why they called so many witnesses who detailed seeing him being physically abusive towards her. They called a makeup artist who said he'd witnessed her being physically abusive. They called witnesses who said that they'd seen her with a fat lip, witnesses who said that, yes, she'd had to spend days in a hotel room recovering from her injuries. So that's why they were seeking to portray him as a really violent man.
And Martha, we also heard throughout the trial from 35 witnesses across the whole trial, but we heard from a lot of personal assistants, didn't we, and employees, and it was clear that many people were involved in certainly facilitating this kind of lifestyle that he lived.
Yeah, definitely. But crucially, the jury didn't find him guilty on racketeering. So that means that, they viewed this as being an ordinary celebrity entourage, a network of bodyguards and personal assistants and other helpers, yes, but not a criminal enterprise. So they decided that they didn't help him cover up these alleged crimes. But yes, we got a window into the way that, these celebrities operate, into the way that Sean Combs had people at his beck and call, that he woke up assistants in the middle of the night to do his bidding, that he flew off the handle if, they didn't do exactly what he said in the exact instance that he demanded it. We saw a picture of Sean Combs as an incredibly unpleasant individual at times, but crucially, not a criminal on those three most serious charges, so say this jury. We did, though, hear from one of his personal assistants who testified under the pseudonym Mia. She was very close to Sean Combs. She was his personal assistant for 8 years. She said that on occasion he had physically and sexually assaulted her a number of times. She said he'd forced her into oral sex and even raped her on one occasion. But Sean Combs was not standing trial for the physical or sexual abuse of Mia. She was a support witness, if you like, for the government. She was speaking to the racketeering charge, this idea that Combs created a culture of silence around him. But again, the defence laughed off her claims. They really berated her on the stand, almost. They said that she was motivated by money, that she'd just come out of the woodwork as a result of the civil lawsuits that are mounting up against Sean Combs. And that's something that we need to remember. While he has escaped guilty verdicts in the most serious criminal charges against him, there are still outstanding civil lawsuits against Sean Combs. So he presumably will still have to fight those, perhaps in court, perhaps out of court.
OK, Martha, thanks so much for that for now. So the breaking news, if you are just joining us here on Sky News, Sean Diddy Combs has been found guilty of 2 counts of transportation for prostitution, but cleared of the more serious charges, 2 of sex trafficking and 1 of racketeering conspiracy. And in the last few minutes, the judge has adjourned the court while he considers whether or not to free Sean Diddy Combs on bail after his conviction on those 2 lesser charges. Let's talk now to David Arenberg. He's a former state attorney for Palm Beach County, and he's able to join us now. Dave, good to talk to you today. What's your reaction to this verdict? What do you make of it?
I was shocked because I thought the evidence was really strong against Diddy. And the fact when the jury came back and was undecided on the racketeering count, I thought that meant he was found guilty on human trafficking, because it was much easier to prove human trafficking than prove racketeering. So why would you be undecided on the hardest count of all unless you were finding him guilty of the easier counts? But no, they found him not guilty on all 2 counts of human trafficking as well as racketeering, and only found him guilty of the weakest crimes, the Mann Act, which could still put him in prison, but it's not going to be anywhere close to the maximum, which is 10 years per count. So it would be 20 years.
So in terms of a prison sentence, the fact that this is the first time he's been up in front of a judge for this, realistically, what do you think the judge will be considering now, and what will he be looking at for this sentence?
Well, the judge heard all the evidence and probably thinks that this was a big victory for the defense, that Diddy got away with this, because the evidence was pretty clear in my mind. There was human trafficking. I mean, I'm shocked that they didn't believe it, at least in regards to Cassie. The jury even asked for her testimony to be reread back to them. And yet they apparently believe that the 2 victims, Cassie and Jane, consented, that they were willing participants the whole way through, never revoked their consent at any time. So I think the judge is going to see all that and probably give him a tougher sentence than a normal defendant. So if I had to guess, I would say he'll be sentenced to prison perhaps up to 5 years. I don't anticipate he'll go much higher than that.
Wow, but that's still a sizable period inside. And he has, of course, been held on remand, as we would call it here, for a number of days. So realistically, you know, he could be serving a handful of years in prison, you think?
Right. He'll get time served for the days he's already spent behind bars. So it could be a 2-year sentence, and then because he spent all his time behind bars, he'll walk free in months. Or it could be perhaps a 5-year sentence, and then that would result in real incarceration. He could give him up to 20 years, but the guidelines here, I think, are much lower as an offender without a lengthy criminal record. So we'll see. But this judge heard the evidence like the rest of us, and I'm sure this judge is just as surprised as the rest of us.
There are a number of civil lawsuits in the pipeline now as well. How will this verdict affect them?
The verdict will have little effect on the civil lawsuits. Now, what's interesting is that if Diddy was found guilty, that guilty verdict would have helped the civil lawsuits. But since he was acquitted, the civil lawsuits will go forward. They have a lower standard than the criminal cases, where criminal cases, you need to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a high burden. For civil cases, you just need to show by a preponderance of the evidence that things happen. That's 50% plus one. That's just more likely than not that it occurred. And I apologize for the dogs in the background, but you know they're as upset about this verdict as I am.
Do you think this verdict is going to cause pause before we see more celebrity trials of this nature? I mean, you know, looking across the other side of the pond, the evidence, you know, it was pretty compelling on lots of different fronts. Does the fact that he is a celebrity, do you think that came into the jury's decision here?
It's hard for jurors to ignore the fact that Diddy is a wealthy, famous individual. And so for sure they knew that, and that had to factor in some way. Also, the jury was not sequestered. So the jury probably got some outside information they were not supposed to be privy to. So that's another issue here. But you can't retry him for these same crimes under our Constitution. You can't have what's called double jeopardy. So he goes free on all these crimes except for the prostitution counts, and he could still face some justice there. But I do think celebrity matters, and this is in a post-Me Too environment where it used to be that you believe women. Now it's a different environment where these accused sex offenders have been treated a little differently. Bill Cosby is free, for example, and now Diddy goes free.
And in terms of him going free, in inverted commas, the judge has adjourned the court while he considers whether or not to set him free on bail. The prosecution and defence have been asked to go away and think about sentencing and come back at 1 p.m. your time. I mean, could we see Diddy walking free this afternoon?
It's possible, and I perhaps misspoke when I said Diddy goes free, because this was a victory for Diddy. I mean, Diddy faced the rest of his life in prison and only was convicted on the most minor counts. So I keep thinking he gets acquitted entirely, but no, he did get convicted of those lesser counts. He could still stay behind bars. It'll be up to the judge, but the defense lawyers will surely say that you kept this guy behind bars because of the allegations of violence, of intimidating witnesses, of racketeering, human trafficking, not because of prostitution. So let him go home until he's sentenced. We'll see what the judge does.
What impact do you think this will have on his career?
The information that came out about him should damage him in the court of public opinion. Even though he was acquitted of the toughest counts, he's still a vile individual who forced women to do terrible things and committed force against them. I mean, that video can't
I'm just going to cut across you. Sorry, Dave. I do apologise. Just as we're talking to you, we're seeing a huge number of the family coming out of the court there. Let's just see if we can take it with a different camera. Goodness me, look at the scrum there as they're leaving the court and getting into this huge people carrier.
How are you feeling?
Rise it up! Rise it up! Next step, rise it up! Bad boy back! The rise of the bad boy!
Sorry, coming through, man.
Rise of the bad boy!
All right.
Ride him up, baby!
All right, excuse me.
How are you feeling? feeling?
Sorry. After the guilty verdicts. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Seen as the family left the court today.
I'll go around. So many freaking people.
And fans and detractors, people who have been gathering here.
How are you feeling?
On the sidewalk, please. Back up.
How are the family feeling about the verdict? How are the family feeling? How are the family feeling about the verdict?
Bless y'all. You ready, bro?
And it is courthouse May.
Well, chaotic scenes outside the court there where Sean Diddy Coombs has been found not guilty of sex trafficking. In the last few moments, we just saw there in that black vehicle in front of the cameras there, his family coming out, his mother, Janice, and 7 of his children, including his twins, Jesse, James and Delilah. I didn't hear him myself, but you may well have heard some bad language during that, and if so, we do apologise. We clearly are not in control of that. But the family have come out of the court and gone into this vehicle. Just a bit of movement there, sort of someone coming back out, maybe somebody else getting back in. You heard Martha Kellner down there shouting out to family members, how are the family feeling? No response, but certainly smiles as they came out of court. And we heard from Martha a short while ago that when they were in court, they were clapping, they were cheering, they were, along with the defence team, hugging themselves, hugging each other. And as for Sean Diddy Coombs, he was apparently on his knees praying. He had given a prayer gesture to the jury after they had delivered their verdict, and he was on his knees praying whilst he was sitting in the court. Now, we were talking to David Arenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County in Florida, just a few moments ago, and he was saying it's entirely possible that Sean Diddy Coombs could get released as early as this afternoon. He has been held on remand for quite a while. It is a custodial sentence potentially of as little as 2 years, as many as 20 years possibly that he could serve. But whilst the judge considers that, his passport has been surrendered and his defence team have asked if he can be released on bail. So the judge is going to consider that. He has adjourned the court while he considers that. And he has asked both the defence and prosecution to come back to him to give their thoughts about sentencing at 1 p.m. New York time, which is 6 p.m. UK time. So there will certainly be more activity at the court then. We don't know whether the family are just going to sort of remain there in that vehicle outside the court, whether they've maybe just gone there to shelter from the media glare, or whether that vehicle is going to move away and that they're going to maybe return to the court in a couple of hours' time at 6 p.m. our time. But there is an enormous media scrum outside the court in New York. And as Martha was saying, there is the mainstream media, as they are called. You can see lots of the gazebos in the background of the shot there, where those media are sheltering, but also so many bloggers, so many entertainment correspondents down there, so many influencers down there, all giving their take on what is happening. It is 4 o'clock. You're watching Sky News. If you are just joining us, the breaking news this hour is that Sean Diddy Coombs has been found guilty of 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution at a court in New York, but he has been found not guilty of the more serious charges of racketing and conspiracy and sex trafficking that he was facing. Our correspondent Martha Kellner is down there. She's in that media scrum at the front of the court. Martha, pretty chaotic scenes. We've just seen the family come out and they're now just sitting in that black vehicle just outside the court.
Yeah, the family now just pulling away from this courthouse inside that big black people carrier with blacked out windows. 6 of 7 of Sean Combs's children. The 7th is just a toddler, and in fact the mother of that youngest child was also in court. She's called Dana Tran. She was part of the celebrations that this family had as the verdicts were read out. Our colleagues who were inside the court at that point said that the jury was stony-faced as those verdicts were being read out, not really looking over at Combs, but he nodded towards them as the judge thanked them. He was holding the hand, Sean Combs, of Taney Garagos, who was one of the lead defence lawyers as that verdict was read out. The judge asked Sean Combs if he didn't want to go back to the Metropolitan Detention Centre. That's the prison in Brooklyn where he spent the last 10 months of his life. Sean Combs vigorously shook his head at that. I think it's very clear that he wants to walk away from this courthouse today, even if it means that he spends a portion of time under house arrest. But yeah, as you were saying, it is utter chaos outside this courthouse. There are some members of Sean Combs's family and entourage inside this blacked out people carrier. I'm not entirely sure who is in there. There's a collection of relatives, his children, but also his mother, Janice, bodyguards as well. He has a documentary crew that's been following every move of the family during the past 7 weeks as well. They're inside these 2 vans. You can see it pulling away, but yeah, you know, a collection, an assortment of various people outside this court, the conventional mainstream media, if you like, but then dozens and dozens of members of the general public, of influencers too, who have been live streaming throughout this case. You know, I've covered a lot of celebrity court trials, the trial of R. Kelly, the trial of Donald Trump and of Ghislaine Maxwell, but this is by far the most chaotic scene I've seen outside a courthouse. There is really no order to things here, and just imagine what it will be like if Sean Combs does indeed walk away from this courthouse this afternoon. The judge, of course, awaiting those applications about sentencing from both the prosecution, the government's team of attorneys, and from his own defence attorneys.
Martha, for people who are just tuning our way, remind us of the key moments of this trial.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a fascinating trial throughout. You know, 7 weeks. The evidence portion of this trial has taken really 2 key star witnesses. Cassandra Ventura, who gave evidence about what she said was a huge power and wealth imbalance in the more than a decade-long relationship that she had with him. She detailed there's people getting into a dispute outside court here. That's what you're seeing on your screen about this verdict. You know, people feel very passionately about this case. Clearly, some on the side of Sean Combs, some on the side of the women who gave evidence in this case. So, as I was saying, the 2 key star witnesses, Cassie Ventura, who gave evidence while almost 9 months pregnant. I found her testimony very affecting. She spoke about being beaten regularly by Sean Combs during their relationship. She said that she lived in fear of him, not only physical fear of him, but she said she feared that he would release videos that he had filmed of these so-called freak-offs. These are the sex marathons, the drug-fueled sex sessions where she says she was forced to have sex with male prostitutes. Those were on camera, and she says that Sean Combs lauded favoured those films over her, that she felt that if she didn't continue to go along with his every wish and desire, that he would release those videos to humiliate her. That was part of the prosecution's case, that Sean Combs blackmailed her, the sex trafficking charges that spoke to. Well, this jury didn't believe the prosecution case because they found him not guilty in the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, but also of Jane, the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Sean Combs was in a relationship with her up until very recently. In fact, he was still in a relationship with her when Cassie Ventura filed her civil lawsuit against Combs. And Jane actually said to Sean Diddy Combs that reading through that lawsuit that Cassie Ventura had filed was like reading, in her words, her own sexual trauma. But it seems like this jury, in terms of what they've decided, the verdicts that they've handed down, they have sided with Sean Combs over these two women, the two key star witnesses.
And Martha, in the last few moments, we've heard from one of the prosecution lawyers, that's Douglas Wigdor. He's been speaking in the last few minutes. Let's just listen to him.
Reaction to what happened?
The reaction is that we're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for two federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life. He still faces substantial jail time. Of course, we would have liked to have seen a conviction on the sex crimes in RICO, but we understand beyond a reasonable doubt is a high standard, and we're just pleased that he still faces substantial jail time. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
How much time?
Doug Wigdor, W-I-G-D-O-R. Well, each is faces up to 10 years on each. I'm not sure what the sentencing guidelines are given the various different things, but I'll leave that up to the government and the defense to argue. But I feel confident in saying he still faces substantial incarceration.
How will you feel if he walks out on bail?
Well, that's up to the judge. I don't have a personal vested interest in this case. Whatever the appropriate thing to do under the law is what should be done. And at the end of the day, he needs to be sentenced pursuant to the guidelines and pursuant to what the law is. My understanding of that is that he faces significant incarceration. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Martha, the prosecution lawyer there obviously favouring some of the heavier sentences that Sean Combs could potentially face. But, you know, we were talking to our former state attorney a short while ago. He thinks it's likely to be a much smaller sentence. And there is also the possibility that we could actually see him released as early as this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, these transportation for prostitution charges, there are two of those charges which Sean Combs has been found guilty of, one relating to Cassie Ventura, one relating to the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Each of them carry a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. So if this judge decides that they should be charged consecutively, I guess it is feasible that the maximum sentence is 20 years. It is, however, extremely unlikely that Sean Combs will receive a sentence anywhere close to that. He is a first-time offender, and the judge will take that into account. And I think the fact that the judge actually asked Sean Combs if he doesn't want to return to the prison where he spent the past 10 months of his life, the fact that he asked him that question, that Sean Combs vigorously shook his head, I think that does raise the possibility that he may be released from prison as early as from custody as early as this afternoon. Of course, right now he's inside that courtroom together with his defence team. I'm told that his sons, he had 6 of his 7 children inside court. One of his sons, Christian, was asked by our colleagues at NBC how he was feeling, and he responded with just one word. He said, great. Sean Combs's daughters who were in court, the youngest of whom are his 18-year-old twins, Delilah and Jessie James, they were asked how they were feeling, and they said good, happy. I think the joy perhaps most acutely expressed, though, by his defence lawyers, who have worked so hard to try and return these not guilty verdicts. Tini Garagos, she was crying while she was hugging the Combs family. So a whole lot of emotion tied up in this. But you imagine that Cassie Ventura and Jane must be feeling incredibly disappointed with the verdict handed down by this jury. And as you heard there, as you heard just before, the lawyer for Cassie Ventura, her personal lawyer, Douglas Wigdor, who was in court supporting her as she was giving evidence, he paid tribute once more to her courage. He said she displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion, he said. He continued saying this case proved that change is long overdue and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. But there is no doubt about it. This series of verdicts has gone in favour of Sean Combs. You can see here another dispute between two members of the public who are outside court. Very heated scenes here. It has, and this phrase is often overused, but it has been a circus outside court over the past 7 weeks. Lots of bad language, lots of swearing, people selling T-shirts saying a freak-off does not equal RICO. RICO stands for the racketeering charges. There is a huge amount of almost comedy around this very serious case. Lots of raised voices outside court here. For now, the family, the Combs family, have left, but we do expect them to return for 1 p.m. Local time this afternoon, so less than 2 hours from now, as the judge reads out the applications from the prosecution and the defence team in regards to the sentencing of Combs. But for now, still huge crowds gathered outside the Southern District of New York courthouse, where this shock verdict has just been handed down.
Martha, we'll leave it there. The signal is going a little bit and it's all getting a little bit frenetic down there. And I should again just apologise if any of your viewers were able to discern any bad language that they may have overheard during that live coverage there. Let's return to Dave Arenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida. And Dave, just a thought from you really before we go about the speed of the verdict and the fact that it was unanimous. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I was a bit surprised on the racketeering count. I thought that would be a hung jury because that is the hardest count. It is tough to get your head around whether this group of individuals constituted a criminal enterprise like the mafia. That's where RICO started, to go after the mob, not necessarily go after a group like this, but the jury did its job and then eventually came to a unanimous agreement. But I got to tell you, the biggest surprise came on the human trafficking count. I mean, there was video of force against Cassie. It was replayed over and over again. She tried to leave one of the freak-offs when she saw there was a sex worker in there. I mean, she didn't consent to every freak-off, but I guess a jury felt if you consented at the beginning, you can't revoke it. And that's an old way of thinking. That's definitely not a way of thinking during the Me Too movement, but we're now living in a post-Me Too environment.
Interesting stuff. Dave Arenberg, good to get your thoughts today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's cross now to Joseph Cosgrove, who's a retired judge of Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court. He joins us now. Very good to talk to you, Joseph. So talk us through sentencing now, really. What is the judge in this case now going to be weighing up? He's asked the defence and prosecution to go away and come back in a couple of hours to share their thoughts. But what will his thoughts be and what will he be considering?
Well, the first thing the judge must consider is now whether Mr. Combs should be released on bail. He's been detained for the past 10 months and lodged in a federal facility. So he will get credit for that time that he has served. whatever sentence may be imposed. He already has 10 months in. But the judge, as every judge I've ever known, including myself when I was a trial judge, every judge will tell you that sentencing is the most difficult part of a judge's job. You're taking a person, you're assessing their life, you're assessing what their crime was, you're assessing the evidence that was presented against them. You obviously accept the jury's verdict. But in federal court, judges have the opportunity to consider also what's called relevant conduct. That means although Mr. Combs was acquitted of these, the charge of RICO and the charge of sex trafficking, the judge can nonetheless consider the evidence that was presented by the prosecution in those two instances and can use that against Mr. Combs when he decides what sentence to impose. The first thing he will do is consider what the probation office, the U.S. probation office, will prepare something called a pre-sentence report. And that pre-sentence report will divide up what are called the sentencing guidelines that are created by the U.S. Sentencing Commission. And that is an assessment of time. The offense itself, in this case, the two charges of transportation for prostitution purposes, they have a certain number of months in incarceration. Then the judge will consider, under the guidelines, aggravating factors, maybe mitigating factors. Mr. Combs has never been prosecuted before. Again, the relevant conduct will come into play, and there will be a number set. And then the judge has to use that number as sort of a starting point. He can go up from that. He can go down from that. If he does, if he deviates from that number, he has to have a basis for it, a reasonable basis. Otherwise, there's a chance of overturning that on appeal. So it's a complicated process from here on. In fact, that's where most federal criminal litigation takes place, is on the issue of sentencing, since most cases end in plea agreements. Not in this case, obviously, but it is now a much more complicated process than the ordinary sentence, perhaps in a state court that doesn't have these kinds of intricate mechanisms.
The judge we're hearing reported apparently asked Sean Combs if he wanted to return to prison. What do you make of that? Why would the judge ask a question like that?
Well, yeah, it sounds unusual, doesn't it? But I think probably the basis for that was that as I said, Mr. Combs will gain credit for time served. So if he is in a situation that is not, I mean, no one wants to be incarcerated, no one wants to be detained, but if he is in a stable situation, knowing that sentencing will probably take place, I would say probably within the next 45 days, could be longer, but I would think that it would be a month and a half or 2 months, rather than, and knowing that he's probably going to be sentenced to some time that would be more than the 10 months. Does he want to continue to accumulate credit? That would be the one basis that I can see for the judge asking that kind of question.
And just to be clear, what would you say would be the minimum sentence we could maybe expect to hear? And what would you think realistically would be a maximum?
You know, as a judge in the trial system, I often did not know and should not have known what sentence I would impose until I went through not only the assessment of the pre-sentence report and the sentencing guideline evaluation, but also the presentation the actual sentencing itself of witnesses, of the defendant himself, from the lawyers. And at that point, that's when I made my decision. I may have had a hunch as to where I thought the sentence should be, but it wasn't until that moment that I made the decision. So it's hard to speculate what this judge will do. I can see a sentence here, probably between 5 and 10 years. That would be, I think, on the low end. The judge, he sat through this trial. He listened to all the evidence. Some of it was grotesque and graphic, which may mean that Mr. Combs is a bad person, but it may not mean, as the jury found, that he's not a racketeer. He's not a sex trafficker. And so, but the judge may have a different view on that. It may say, well, there's enough evidence for me to consider that this is a person that is of such a character that he should not be given any sort of, as we'll call it, break. And the judge can impose a sentence above 10 years up to 20. He can combine the two sentences of possibly 10 years. I don't think that'll happen because, again, he would have to justify that and justify that in a sense contrary to the jury's verdict. But he has the power to do that. Federal judges in sentencing are very powerful.
And we heard from a former state attorney from Palm Beach, Florida, saying it's hard for jurors to avoid the fact that the person that they're hearing all this evidence is about is a celebrity. And as much as the court will try to reassure them that they must put that from their minds, it will be there in their minds. Is it equally hard for judges?
Well, we would hope that we take every person for who they are and what they are. His celebrity may be part of his character, but it should not one way or the other way in favor or against him. That's going to be one of the aspects of the court's consideration. What kind of person is this? He's had a successful career in the music and entertainment industry. He has been very well celebrated. That's what celebrities are. He has many followers. But he also has this body of evidence that was presented in court that over the past month and a half that has just been horrible. The video of the terrible encounter with Cassie, it's just a horrible assessment. The judge can't ignore that, and celebrity does not trump that.
The fact that he has had his family and his children in court with him throughout this trial, is that something that the judge considers? Does that sway you in any way, that he has this sort of family backup?
Well, that's an important factor as to who this person is, that he has a supportive community around him. That would be the same with any defendant. The fact that they have a family, that they have children that rely on and that trust, and that, the judge will probably hear from them at the sentencing. He will probably hear them directly, either testifying or through submissions of letters. I would imagine in a case like this, there will be thousands of letters sent to the judge that the judge will take into account and consider. And those letters will probably be balanced for and against. But there will be a great deal of support. And family support is a major factor that a judge considers when imposing sentence. So the fact that they've been there through trial, that's important. But there will also be victim impact that will equally play in the judge's consideration. These people have been harmed, and now they are victims of crimes. The jury has determined that crimes have been committed, and these two women have been the victims of those crimes. So the judge will take that into serious consideration as well.
And in terms of those victim impacts, here in the UK, we have something called victim impact statements, where victims are given an opportunity to write down how this case has affected them, how it's changed their lives, and the judge considers that. Is that the same in the States? I mean, this is how, obviously, the sentencing appears to be coming straight after the verdict. We're often, here in the UK, there's a delay before that point.
Well, I'm assuming there's going to be a delay here as well. That again, I don't believe sentencing. I don't know what the judge had indicated earlier. I had not seen, but the sentencing, unless there is some agreement, which I cannot imagine that the prosecution and defense have agreed on a particular term. So I would imagine sentencing is going to be certainly delayed, and as I said, through that process of pre-sentence reports. And yes, we use the same language, victim impact statements. We did that in state courts. Federal courts have essentially the same thing. So there will be some response from the victims. Now, they will be interviewed certainly by the probation officers, and those probation officers in preparing their pre-sentence report will include the statements of the victims, the position of the victims, but they may have a more formal position as well, whether that's testifying or whether they submit something in writing to the court. But that will have a major impact, I'm sure, on what the judge decides.
And these victim impact statements, are they made public?
Well, again, federal judges have a great deal of power. I doubt that they will be in this case. But the victim themselves, they will have the opportunity to make them public or to speak about them in public if they wish. I'm sure that these are counseled people. One of them was presented with the anonymous name of Jane, but she may, through her counsel, may present whatever she wants. They may ask the court not to reveal that. Judges have a great deal of power in that. Personally, I would be disinclined to reveal a victim impact statement other than to the defendant. The defendant has a right to know what the judge is considering.
Interesting stuff. Retired Judge Joseph Cosgrove, really good to get your expertise today. Thank you so much for talking us through all of that. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, just as we were talking, we have had a statement through. We actually heard a little clip from him standing on the court steps a few moments ago. Douglas Wigdall, he is one of the prosecution lawyers, and he was the lawyer that represented Ms. Ventura. That's Cassie Ventura, and she is the unfortunate lady that the video of being dragged along a hospital corridor by her hair. She has issued the following statement in response to the verdict. It says, the entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November 2023. Although the jury did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking, Cassie, beyond a reasonable doubt, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. By coming forward with her experience, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. We must repeat, with no reservation, that we believe and support our client, who showed exemplary courage throughout this trial. She displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion. This case proved that change is long overdue, and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. So that there, the prosecution lawyer representing Cassie Ventura, saying that despite the not guilty verdicts for 3 of these charges, that they repeat that they believe and support their client, who showed courage throughout. And interesting that they're saying this draws attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion, and that this case proves that change is long overdue, and they are saying that they will continue to fight on behalf of survivors.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check. Oh shit. Anyone want a mic check? Check 1 2. Check.
Well, Joseph Cosgroves is still with us, the retired judge of Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court, and. Joseph, just hearing that statement from prosecutor Douglas Wigdall, his final thought, this case proved that change is long overdue. We will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. Do you think this case will lead to any kind of change? Do you think women may, and not just women, men as well, may feel more able to come forward if they feel that they have been treated badly by somebody who perhaps is in a position of power or in a position of fame?
Well, when you have someone of this enormous presence in the entertainment industry, who has been in a rather somber situation over the last 10 months and is likely going to spend years in jail, I don't know how many years, that should send a message to anyone that no one is above the law, that victims have rights, that victims of sexual misconduct and sexual harm have rights as well, which sometimes that may not have been the case in our criminal justice system. They may have not been considered, may not have been given opportunity to present their side. One of the issues in this case was, well, some of the sexual conduct was consensual. And so does that absolve the non-consensual activity? Well, of course not. And the jury was clear on that. And the jury did its job. The sex trafficking and the RICO charges are very, very complicated and complex. But the jury did its job and made the determination that no, indeed, consent does, in one instance, does not absolve the horrible criminal conduct in the other instances. And the jury spoke as members of the community, and I think that's a message that will certainly be heard and should be heard.
Joseph Cosgrove, retired judge of Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court. Thank you very much again.
My pleasure.
Well, let's now bring in Lisa Bonham, who's an entertainment attorney and a former litigator as well. Lisa, good to talk to you today. What do you make of this verdict?
Thank you for having me. I, like a lot of other lawyers, am shocked. There are one school of us who really are more astonished with the verdict. And there is another school of thought, just like the jurors, who are pleased with the verdict. So I have been consistent in stating that the elements of RICO seemed to be present and they seem to have been met. You have the issue of the criminal enterprise in terms of looking at people who helped allegedly or accused of helping Sean move in a certain way in terms of helping him further this issue of sex trafficking. And so when you have a RICO charge, you do have to look for the criminal enterprise, which we just talked about. And then you have to go down and look for predicate crimes. You only need 2 of the predicate crimes, of which there are 35. And I believe that Sean was accused of 8 of them. And in my opinion, I was seeing those being met, quite honestly. But what I have also been consistent in saying is that what matters is what the jury says. And none of the lawyers who were not in the court, none of the persons who were not in the court, none of us were privy to all of the information that the jurors saw. They were privy to a lot of information in terms of the freak-offs. They saw approximately, over an hour's worth of tape that we never saw. So we don't know what was on those tapes. Those jurors were the only ones that were in that courthouse for 7 weeks straight. And they are the ones who delivered the verdict. And they are the ones who are standing by it. And we have to respect the verdict, whether or not we agree with it or not. But I do agree with what Cassie's lawyer said in terms of looking for justice, if you will, for people who have been trafficked, or people who have been caught up in this cycle of sex trafficking or being in an abusive relationship and not being able to flee. That is a setback for those people. And remember, what we were looking for was force, fraud, or coercion. And implicit and explicit in every sexual relationship is consent. And it was clear, in my opinion, again, I'm not a juror, but it was clear in my opinion when they said they only needed 1. If you look at Sean dragging Cassie back, that seemed to be met. But you also have to juxtapose that with the personal relationship that they had. And that is where it seems to be that the jurors had the hardest time separating. Aside from the fact that RICO is notoriously difficult to understand, and there were 50 pages or so of RICO instructions, you do have that underlying incident that these were people who were in relationships with him for long periods of time. So clearly, the jurors did believe that this was a consensual relationship and believed the defense's argument that this was just between those two. When you did have other instances where you did show the commercial use of his human and commercial resources to further this behavior of the alleged sex trafficking, but the jurors obviously did not buy that.
This case has lifted the lid slightly, hasn't it? And I mean, I suppose it's a lid that was already lifted. I'm thinking back to the Michael Jackson trial that I covered almost 20 years ago. The side effect of fame that we've seen here makes behaviour which is extreme, and many people would say unacceptable, entirely possible.
Correct. And if you look at the R. Kelly case, which was tried just across the river in the Eastern District of New York, you have R. Kelly, who was convicted of RICO and sex trafficking. Some of his victims were younger and underage, but 2 of his victims were people who were in relationships with R. Kelly. So this is not an unusual type of verdict to reach, but it is a very difficult verdict for non-lawyers and laypersons to understand. So it does lift the lid. It does make this type of behavior acceptable. That is why I had such a hard time seeing it. In terms of understanding consent, understanding force, fraud, and coercion, I don't see that even though the fact that this was a relationship, that does not negate the fact that certain times that you only needed 1 time, that maybe this did not rise to that. And remember, as I talked about, it is explicit and implicit in every sexual relationship and in every sexual encounter that consent is necessary. And so it is well known and established fact that husbands can be convicted of raping their wives. So it is no different. But apparently the jurors had a difficult time separating the personal and professional relationship of Combs. And they really said, this is his personal business. This did not rise to anything that had to do with his underlying enterprise, his business, even though there were texts that supported that D-Rock, his security guard, and Christina Karam were allegedly in furthering that. They did have instances that was shown where they did further certain conduct that could have been seen as aiding and abetting and setting up and facilitating the underlying element of sex trafficking in the RICO charge. And then you do have the other issue. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get to this point about the predicate crimes. Once you have force, fraud, or coercion, you also have to look at a pattern that is established and really go down the rabbit hole. There are 35 predicate crimes under RICO, and there were 8 charged in this instance. And you only need 2 of them: arson, kidnapping, forced labor, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. There are a lot of those that seem to me, as a lawyer who understands it, that especially when things were used, credit cards were used, human resources from Combs Enterprise were used, that did seem to meet the RICO charge. But again, what matters is what the jury said, and the jury has spoken. There is a double jeopardy that is attached. He cannot be retried. This conviction cannot be appealed. And so the verdict stands as is, and that is something that we all have to accept and respect, whether we agree with it or not.
And you said, that the jury were struggling a little bit with some elements. I mean, the jury did come back pretty quickly, didn't they? Were you surprised by how fast they delivered these verdicts?
I was surprised that they delivered it as quickly as they did with the result that we have seen. I will be clear in the fact, as I said before, I stand by what I saw and what a lot of us other lawyers really did seem to be into the elements, meeting the elements of RICO, of the separate personal accounts of sex trafficking of Cassie and Jane. So I was actually very, very surprised. I will say that and stand in that truth. I was very surprised that they came back as quickly as they did, rendering the verdict that they did, because it seemed so obvious to a lot of us in the legal profession who do understand the elements of RICO that these seem to be met in the predicate crimes. But again, it is a very difficult charge to understand. And so when you're asking lay people to opine and use the reasonable person standard, it is very, very difficult for people to understand. And when you're looking at a case that carries 15 years to life, the jury wants to be sure in their opinion that they are being fair and impartial and delivering what they believe is justice. And they have delivered what they believe is justice.
Lisa, just as we've been talking to you, we've got a statement through from the United States Attorney's Office. So this is the prosecutors here, statement on the verdict in the US versus Sean Combs. They say the highlights of it are sex crimes deeply scar victims. And the disturbing reality is that sex crimes are all too present in many aspects of our society. Victims endure gut-wrenching physical and mental abuse, leading to lasting trauma. New Yorkers and all Americans want this scourge stopped and the perpetrators brought to justice. Prosecuting sex crimes requires brave victims to come forward and tell their harrowing stories. We and our law enforcement partners recognise the hardships victims endure and have prioritised a victim-centred approach to investigating and prosecuting these cases. Today, we recognise the important works of our civil rights unit, as well as the tireless efforts of the women and men who are devoted to combating human trafficking, and they're thanking special agents from the US Attorney's Office and various members of the teams for sharing our victim-centred approach to combating sex crime. So this is the Attorney's Office, the prosecutors, thanking those who took part. Of course, these sex trafficking charges didn't stick, Lisa. He was found not guilty of them. They obviously felt that they had a strong enough case to bring it to court, didn't they? They'll be feeling bruised today that they didn't get a guilty verdict here.
Well, they are feeling bruised professionally, but it is important to remember that we are looking at an individual's life. And as lawyers, we are trained to understand and to accept whatever the jury says. That is, they carry the last word. And so while they may be disappointed professionally, they also have to understand professionally that the jury has spoken. We understand it and we accept it. That does not make it right. That does not make it okay in terms of the societal impact and the victim blaming and not believing the victim, things that women have struggled with time and time and time again throughout history. And this case was brought about because of the Me Too movement. And because of the Me Too movement, California and New York opened a window of opportunity for people who were sex trafficked or who were in terms with people who were alleged victims of sexual crimes, alleged sexual crimes, to come forward and bring the case to court for a 2 or 3 year period. New York was 2 years, California was 3 years, and really reach back and tell the story of what happened to them. That is how Cassie was able, at such a long time, when the statute had expired long ago, even for the domestic violence, which we were not on trial for here, but they were able to go back and to open that door, claw back, if you will, the time and open the door. So that was a period of time when women were celebrating the fact that now our voices are being heard. Now it is people are understanding what I have gone through. And I want to say this as a woman and as one who has worked, my first job as a lawyer was at a domestic violence shelter in East Los Angeles and for battered women. And so when you're looking at the law and seeing what has happened and really taking a moment to look and feel and understand what has happened with the Me Too movement, now it seems to be dialed back. We are looking at a case where this man who has been very highly celebrated and lauded in one instance, but has been accused of horrific crimes, not only in this case, but throughout his entire career. Sean Combs has been plagued with elements of illicit behavior. And so that is another thing that I do believe a lot of people were looking for justice for, things that the Black community, the hip hop community, for example, might understand or be looking for retribution for things that have happened previously, whether they believe he was involved with the death of Biggie Smalls, whether they believe that Shine took a bullet for him and went to jail for 10 years. Those are all things that people have in their minds and want justice. People were invested in this case. I don't think I've seen people invested at such a high emotional quotient since the OJ verdict and the OJ trial. So we have, in my opinion, taken this back in terms of the celebrations and the movements forward that we've made in the Me Too movement. And no woman wants to be famous for the allegations that they talked about on that stand, the graphic testimony that they were given, and having their lives turned inside out, pulled apart, and just examined under a microscope. So I want to absolutely congratulate the courage that it took for Cassie and Jane and Mia and all the other victims, alleged victims and people who were witnesses in this case to come forward and tell their story with such compassion and such just compassion and being very straightforward and heartfelt in their stories. So it was something that took a lot of courage to do. And ultimately, the jury has found and spoken, and we are to respect that no matter what we personally believe.
You mentioned about the Black community there. I was interested to know whether you think there's a different attitude to Me Too, perhaps among the Black community than the white community in America. I just wonder, thinking of the persona of a lot of rap music and a lot of rap musicians, are there differences there in how it's regarded?
That's, the Black people, we are not a monolith, but I think this is really, people were very invested in this. A lot of the African-American community was invested in this because if you look at Sean Combs in terms of the music that he has recorded and the people that he has given us in terms of Biggie Smalls, Mary J. Blige, Mace, some of the biggest rappers, he provides the soundtrack of our lives. So to have someone that the Black community holds in such high regard in one instance in terms of giving us that soundtrack, right? And then looking and having his life pulled apart. And some people were very, very clear that this was the people trying to take down a black man. That was a narrative that we heard time and time again, where other people felt that the behavior that he has been accused of and the domestic violence that he was shown to have committed on that tape and it subsequently admitted to, that was a bridge too far for a lot of people, including myself. So in terms of whether the black community really feels one way or the other, I think we do, just like every other community, have mixed feelings about all of this. And really, people do have very strong opinions about the celebrities that they look up to and what they have given us culturally. And that is, I think, where we stand on the lines in terms of yes or no, or yes, he did this, no, he didn't. And really being so invested in this verdict and so invested in this outcome.
Lisa, I'm going to get you to stay there if you can, because we are able to bring to you a report now from our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, and a warning: it does contain some content that you may find distressing.
Everybody was in black, so I had to come a little lighter colors.
On a global stage, Sean Diddy Combs was known to millions as the music producer, rapper and billionaire businessman who lived a lavish lifestyle, hosting parties that A-listers clamoured to get into.
He was our generation's Barnum. He put on a show. Wherever he went, it was a production.
But this trial exposed a side to his life he'd attempted to keep secret, a reality that included drugs, abuse and now infamously baby oil, all wrapped up in his swinger lifestyle. Prosecutors spent weeks making the case that he used his celebrity status and business empire to run a criminal enterprise to sex traffic women and conceal his crimes. His defence took less than an hour, explaining that while he was regrettably violent, domestic violence is not sex trafficking.
He doesn't come across as a monster. The opposite. He's one of the most charming people you will ever meet.
In March of last year, federal agents raided his homes in Miami and Los Angeles, but it wasn't until September when he was arrested at this New York hotel. For most of this 7-week trial, Combs's mother and his children came to hear the prosecution set out how Combs had not only transported male prostitutes across county lines to act out his sexual fantasies, that he'd also led a criminal enterprise to facilitate his abuse and exploitation of women, all of which he denied. Former employees, police officers, hotel staff and rapper Kid Cudi were all called to give evidence. But there were 3 alleged victims at the heart of this trial who'd known Diddy well. And while 2 asked to remain anonymous, this woman, Cassie Ventura, chose to testify under her own name. His long-term ex-girlfriend, with jurors shown this video. CCTV of Combs attacking her in a hotel corridor in 2016. For over a decade, she said he'd coerced and forced her into drug-fuelled sex sessions with male escorts, now known to anyone who's been following the trial as what Diddy called his freak-offs. The pair first met in 2005 when Combs signed her to his record label. She was 19, he was 37. She claimed his drug-fuelled orgies could sometimes last days, and that Combs would film them, using the video to blackmail her, raping her when she told him she wanted to end things. As well as photos of some of the injuries Cassie sustained when Combs beat her, the jury was also shown pictures of baby oil and drugs found in the hotel room where he was arrested. Voice notes were played which he'd sent a second victim who he'd dated, threatening to stop supporting her after she said she couldn't cope with another hotel night. The third key witness, a former employee, described being sexually assaulted by Combs on several occasions, saying it was the most traumatising, worst thing that's ever happened to me. The defence argued Combs's sexual proclivities did not make him a criminal, that the victims were capable women who could have left of their own accord, showing text messages to illustrate Diddy's belief that the women were willing participants in the encounters. While his lawyers conceded there were drugs, that he had multiple girlfriends and that he could be violent, the jury was reminded he wasn't on trial for domestic violence and ultimately found the government failed to meet the burden in proving most of the charges against him. According to Rob Shooter, Diddy's former publicist, speaking last week, such was Diddy's confidence that plans of how he'd mark his release were already in the works.
My sources are telling me they're already looking for event space to throw a party. to throw a celebration.
While Combs has been cleared of racketeering and sex trafficking, but found guilty of transportation for prostitution, this criminal trial comes to an end. But he still faces a mountain of civil litigation, dozens of claims which he also denies.
We have been fighting those cases behind the scenes. There has been a lot of legal wrangling. The two cases I have are on behalf of a woman and a man alleging sexual misconduct, sex trafficking, and related claims. There are other cases filed by other attorneys that I believe include allegations of underage sex with minors.
For Sean Combs, the damage to his reputation has been incalculable. With his character in tatters, it's hard to see how the music star who built his vast business empire from scratch can ever reach those heights again. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, a short while ago, we heard from the prosecution team outside the court, and we've also had a statement from them. We're expecting the defence team to speak outside the court. They've told our colleagues at NBC in America that they're going to make a statement outside the court at some point in the next hour or so, hopefully. We will bring you that, obviously, when it happens. But let's return to Lisa Bonner, who's an entertainment attorney and a former litigator as well. And Lisa, do you think this case will change anything for the position of women? A lot of famous men in America do have very large entourages of people who work for them, who are associated with them. Will this case change anything?
Will it change anything? We have to look at it to see if it really ever did change. We did have a moment in time. I almost look at it now in light of this verdict as a flash in the pan where women were empowered to come forward and to talk about the issues and the horrific things that have happened to them over the course of their lives in terms of the domestic violence, in terms of the sexual violence that they were alleging. And so does it change anything? I think we have rolled it back. As I said before, during the Me Too movement, women were really, their voices were heard. Believe women the first time. There were several hashtags that were empowering women. And now this is really looking at a case where we are going backwards in time. We are celebrating, maybe that might be too strong of a word, but we are forgiving or choosing not to believe the women as they stated. And as I mentioned before, no woman wants to get up and offer this testimony that is so graphic, that is so private, and for the whole world to opine on and to weigh in on, to give their opinions on. That is something that no woman wants to be famous for. So did we go back? Did we go forward? No, I think we went back. And we are really looking at now playing catch up. This is very much a blow for what was the Me Too movement and believing women.
And let's just have a think about the verdict. We've had some various suggestions of what the verdict could potentially be in this case. What are your thoughts?
Of how we ended with the verdict, what we ended up with the verdict. You want to know my opinion on that?
About sentencing.
Okay. Well, I actually thought initially when they were a hung jury, I really and truly believed, because I understand things as a lawyer, I believed that Sean Combs would have been found guilty on at least the sex trafficking charges, maybe not the conspiracy, the RICO. That was a stretch, but I did believe that we could get there. But in terms of the sex trafficking, where the prosecution stated you only needed to prove one time, and they showed a pattern of times where she was coerced, she tried to leave, or allegedly tried to leave, she was allegedly coerced. And there were instances of alleged bribery, of alleged witness tampering. There were a plethora of things that I felt that lended itself to a different verdict. And when they came back deadlocked on the RICO charge, when I looked at it, I was not so surprised, but I really, honestly, in my opinion, I did think that they were going to also convict on the sex trafficking because the prosecution did a fabulous closing argument and showing a pattern over the past 7 weeks. And then with the surprise gotcha moment, basically saying you only need to prove one instance of force, fraud, or coercion. If you look at it from Cassie's point of view, you can look at it and opine and think realistically that could have been the instance where she was shown to trying to escape the freak off and was dragged back by Sean Combs. I was convinced that that would have gotten the jury there. But again, I believe the toughest issue for the jury to separate was the fact that these women were his girlfriends. These lasted over a period of years, and they kept going back. Yet all the witnesses who talked, from his assistants to the alleged victims, all talked about a very complicated relationship that they had with Sean Combs. So all of them went back, from Dawn Richard to Cassie to many of them, to Mia, to Jane. A lot of these people went back. So that was a problem. Yes, a bridge too far for people to accept.
We are going to leave it there because we're out of time. But Lisa Bonner, entertainment attorney and former litigator, thank you so much for joining us. Lots more on this breaking news after the break with Mark Austin.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
Isn't that crazy? Take his Thanks so much.
How's the family? Is the family? We try to get it this way.
What's happening over there? What's that?
Diddy's mom came back. Oh, okay. Okay, Diddy's mom came back, you guys. Hey, Mom! Miss Combs!
What's up, Miss Combs? Right. That's right, that's right.
We're throwing up the peace sign, y'all.
So the family is coming back in the program. They're cheering for her.
They need to cheer for her.
Mama Combs.
Mama Combs. I don't know.
Oh my God, man. Bring his fucking ass with that hot ass suit on, walk in, rocking everybody content.
I'm going to get upstairs and try to see my side, and then I'm going to try to go right down. Oh, y'all are such hypocrites. Oh my God.
We love you, Miss Combs. Half of y'all over there was rooting against him, now y'all all with him. Get out of here, fake phony people. I can't stand a fake phony person. Half of those people over there was like me. They were saying he need to go to jail. Now when they see Miss Combs, they go, free fucking hypocrites. Look at them. Anything for clout, man. Y'all want to do everything for a video. Get the fuck out. Yo, these people are crazy. Yo, when we first started this trial, half of the people that's out here, more than half, was out here saying he needs to go to jail. He's gonna get found guilty on everything. And then when now you see Miss Combs come through, he got a chance to get back on it.
The mother. Yes. She must feel something about it more like oh, that's not him. My eyes are so bad.
I'll walk you to
I was like, so.
You go up here.
we begin in New York, where a jury has returned verdicts in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. He was cleared of racketeering and of sex trafficking his ex-partner, Cassie Ventura, and another woman referred to as Jane. But the 55-year-old star was convicted of transportation for prostitution, which carries a maximum jail sentence of 10 years. This report from our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, contains images of drugs and domestic violence.
Everybody was in black, so I had to come a little lighter color.
On a global stage, Sean Diddy Combs was known to millions as the music producer, rapper and billionaire businessman who lived a lavish lifestyle, hosting parties that A-listers clamoured to get into.
He was our generation's Barnum. He put on a show. Wherever he went, it was a production.
But this trial exposed a side to his life he'd attempted to keep secret, a reality that included drugs, abuse and now infamously baby oil, all wrapped up in his swinger lifestyle. Prosecutors spent weeks making the case that he used his celebrity status and business empire to run a criminal enterprise to sex traffic women and conceal his crimes. His defence took less than an hour, explaining that while he was regrettably violent, domestic violence is not sex trafficking.
He doesn't come across as a monster. The opposite. He's one of the most charming people you will ever meet.
In March of last year, federal agents raided his homes in Miami and Los Angeles, but it wasn't until September when he was arrested at this New York hotel. For most of this 7-week trial, Combs' mother and his children came to hear the prosecution set out how Combs had not only transported male prostitutes across county lines to act out his sexual fantasies, that he'd also led a criminal enterprise to facilitate his abuse and exploitation of women, all of which he denied. Former employees, police officers, hotel staff and rapper Kid Cudi were all called to give evidence. But there were 3 alleged victims at the heart of this trial who'd known Diddy well. And while 2 asked to remain anonymous, this woman, Cassie Ventura, chose to testify under her own name. His long-term ex-girlfriend, with jurors shown this video. CCTV of Combs attacking her in a hotel corridor in 2016. For over a decade, she said he'd coerced and forced her into drug-fuelled sex sessions with male escorts, now known to anyone who's been following the trial as what Diddy called his freak-offs. The pair first met in 2005 when Combs signed her to his record label. She was 19, he was 37. She claimed his drug-fuelled orgies could sometimes last days, and that Combs would film them, using the video to blackmail her, raping her when she told him she wanted to end things. As well as photos of some of the injuries Cassie sustained when Combs beat her, the jury was also shown pictures of baby oil and drugs found in the hotel room where he was arrested. Voice notes were played which he'd sent a second victim who he'd dated, threatening to stop supporting her after she said she couldn't cope with another hotel night. The third key witness, a former employee, described being sexually assaulted by Combs on several occasions, saying it was the most traumatising, worst thing that's ever happened to me. The defence argued Combs' sexual proclivities did not make him a criminal, that the victims were capable women who could have left of their own accord, showing text messages to illustrate Diddy's belief that the women were willing participants in the encounters. While his lawyers conceded there were drugs, that he had multiple girlfriends and that he could be violent, the jury was reminded he wasn't on trial for domestic violence and ultimately found the government failed to meet the burden in proving most of the charges against him. According to Rob Shooter, Diddy's former publicist, speaking last week, such was Diddy's confidence that plans of how he'd mark his release were already in the works.
My sources are telling me they're already looking for event space to throw a party, to throw a celebration.
While Combs has been cleared of racketeering and sex trafficking, but found guilty of transportation for prostitution, this criminal trial comes to an end. But he still faces a mountain of civil litigation, dozens of claims which he also denies.
We have been fighting those cases behind the scenes. There has been a lot of legal wrangling. The 2 cases I have are on behalf of a woman and a man alleging sexual misconduct, sex trafficking, and related claims. There are other cases filed by other attorneys that I believe include allegations of underage sex with minors.
For Sean Combs, the damage to his reputation has been incalculable. With his character in tatters, it's hard to see how the music star who built his vast business empire from scratch can ever reach those heights again. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
So this is the scene at the courthouse in New York. And just to sum up what we've just heard in the court, it's a mix of guilty and not guilty verdicts. On the racketeering, the most serious charge, conspiracy to racketeer, not guilty. Sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, his ex-girlfriend, not guilty. On the prostitution charge, transportation for the engagement of prostitutes of Ventura and others, guilty. Sex trafficking of a woman known as Jane, not guilty. Transportation for prostitution of Jane and others, guilty. So guilty on those prostitution charges, which could lead to prison terms of 10 years for each of the guilty offences, but much more likely, we're told by lawyers, to be less than that. And what is happening now is that the judge in the case has been asked by Sean Combs's lawyers to consider letting him out on bail today. The judge is almost certain to defer sentencing. The question we think that is being considered by the judge at the moment is whether to let Sean Diddy Combs out on bail. He's been detained since September last year. And his lawyers are arguing that in the light of the not guilty verdict on the more serious charges, that he is now allowed out on bail. So we wait for that decision, which could come in the next hour or so. Let's bring in Ronse Esangbedo, entertainment reporter and commentator in the United States. And thank you for being with us, Ronse. So an 8-week trial, harrowing evidence at times. But in the end, Sean Combs cleared of these most serious charges, the sex trafficking and the racketeering.
Yeah, it's in some ways a victory for Diddy. The 2 charges he was found guilty of do not have any minimum sentences, so he could very well be a free man today. As you just mentioned, it's not clear what the judge is going to decide. However, I think he has something to be happy about.
Right, and presumably he and his defense team will, well, no doubt be hugely relieved.
Absolutely. I mean, the sex trafficking charges had a minimum sentence of 10 years each, and the RICO charge had a maximum sentence of 20 years. So he could have been spending the rest of his life behind bars. But, he's not scot-free yet. And I think, we just have to wait to see how this plays out.
Right. But for many others, no doubt there will be shock at the verdict. What has been the reaction in the United States?
Mixed reaction. Some fans outside the court are celebrating. I just read that a fan was waving baby oil in celebration, which is truly disturbing. I think it sends a bad message about what makes a victim and how we should think about consent. But at the end of the day, juries are made of human beings, and human beings are flawed. And I think there's always a potential to get a verdict wrong, even in the face of very clear evidence, which I thought we had in this particular case.
Combs's team managed to present much of this as his hedonistic and unconventional sex life, as opposed to being a criminal racket. And that seems to be where the jury has made its decision.
Yeah, I mean, that was just the story, and I think they were successful. And I think the fact that Cassie stayed with him so long, I'm not a mind reader, but I'm assuming that because she was in a relationship with him for that long, it kind of sends a message that she might have been a willing participant. But I think, we have evidence of her trying to get away, evidence of him keeping her away from her family so she can, seek help. So it's complicated. You can't really completely fault the jury for not finding a guilty verdict on the sex trafficking and RICO charges. However, I think that the prosecution had a strong case.
Yes, and I mean, some of the most powerful evidence, Ronse, was this surveillance video of Combs beating his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. But of course, he wasn't standing trial for that. She was a witness in this racketeering case, and he had already admitted domestic abuse and sexual abuse, hadn't he?
Correct. As far as the law is concerned, the domestic abuse has no bearing on RICO and sex trafficking. And so while we might want to see him held accountable for the domestic abuse, that's not what he was on trial for. And, I think that's really where the law can be a bit clinical, where we see someone doing a clear evil, and you simply can't hold it against him if that's not what the case is about.
Right, and there are a number of civil lawsuits in the pipeline. We've already had the civil lawsuit I mentioned relating to Cassie Ventura. How will these verdicts, do you think, affect the civil lawsuits that are still pending?
It's impossible to tell, and I'll use O.J. Simpson as an example, where he was found not guilty in his murder trial, but found liable in the civil trial afterwards. So, I don't think Diddy is completely free, like I said earlier. Maybe he may or may not serve jail time, but he has a lot of people to answer to in civil court.
And just finally, just put in perspective for us just how big a star he has been.
He's one of the biggest we've seen, definitely out of hip hop. As a performer, he's been really successful, but really as an exec, he has a really large footprint. He has helped make lots of big stars. And Notorious B.I.G., one of the most legendary rappers ever, was signed by Diddy. So many rappers, Mace, the R&B singers, all came out from the Bad Boy record label. So he really has kind of a big stamp on hip hop. And I think this is in some ways a stain on the genre, even though this is just one man's wrongdoing. I think he represents something very major for the genre. And I don't think this is a really good look.
OK, Ronse, thank you very much indeed. And as I say, we await the decision of the judge on the question of bail for Sean Diddy Combs.